Vertical AI startups are starting to make some noise. We all know about large language models. We've talked about them here. If you listen to this program, you know about OpenAI, Google's Gemini, previously known as Bard, Anthropic, Claude, all this stuff. They're general purpose. They've been trained on the open internet, as we were just discussing, so they can answer questions about almost anything. And yeah, sometimes it's correct, sometimes they're incorrect, but it's showing promise. There is another school of thought here that's emerging in startups, vertical AI. These companies are kind of taking a job title, a role in society, and they are building vertical apps. Harvey is AI for lawyers. Abridge is doing an AI note taker for doctors, saves them hours a day, according to them. TaxGPT is an AI tax assistant, and Sierra is AI for customer support. That's Brett Taylor's new startup. This week, a startup called Cognition debuted a tool called Devin. They're calling it an AI software engineer. The demos went viral on X. You've probably seen them all over the place and in the news. If you watch it, you can see Devin fixing bugs in real time, fine-tuning an AI model, building apps end-to-end. And people are speculating Devin was built on GPT-4 from OpenAI. That's not confirmed. But according to the CEO, Devin was built by tweaking reasoning and long-term planning into an existing LLM. Here's how it ranks against other major models on coding benchmarks. They're building all these benchmarks to test each language model. And as you can see, it's, according to this chart and according to their data, doing much better than just a generic language model. Kind of makes sense. Chamath, did you see these demos this week? I think I saw you on the group chat talking about it. And what was your take on these role-based vertical startups?
Oh, I think this is so powerful. I mean, it's incredible because we're measuring this progress in week over week.
Feels like that. Yeah.
I think the point that you should take away is that the most of these very difficult, impenetrable job types for the average person, if you said to them, hey, become a developer, that's like a complicated journey, right? It's just going to be now like a command line interface where you just kind of describe in English what you want to do. And all of this stuff will just happen behind the scenes and it'll be totally automated. So that'll grow the number of people that can use these tools. At the same time, it'll make the developers, I think, even more valued because you're going to need people in the guts of these models and in the code that it generates because it's not always going to work perfectly. There's always going to be some kind of hallucination. Some stuff is not going to compile. Now, the demos that they did, though, were incredible. They were able to find errors. They were able to remediate errors in code. I think it's really, really special. Super cool.
You've been on Copilots for the past year talking about that. This is slightly different. We're moving from, hey, here's a Copilot, somebody helping a developer, to, hey, here's a developer working, and now they have a supervisor. So what do you think of these sort of role-based agents and how quickly we went from year one co-piloting to, okay, now they're the pilot and we're sitting in the co-pilot seat watching them fly the plane?
Yeah, well, look, first of all, everyone's working on autonomous coding or working towards that. This is like one of the core, most obvious use cases of LLMs because code is text and it can also be run through a compiler to debug it. So you can also get to, in theory, you can get to high levels of accuracy yet, although in the example that you gave, Jason, this new product was only at 13%. So there's still a long way to go, but the potential is clearly there. So a lot of companies are working on some variation of this idea. Devin is, I guess you could call it an agent-first approach. And I think that's very cool for generating new software projects. But where I think this gets much trickier and is much more difficult is when you're working in existing code bases. And just to talk my own book for a second, we're an investor in a company called SourceGraph. They have a product called Cody, and their whole approach is context first as opposed to agent first. It's all about getting the Copilot to work inside of existing code bases. So different companies are coming at this from different approaches. GitHub Copilot, I think, is kind of more like Cody, where it's all about making an existing code base more useful. Whereas Devin, again, is starting with, I think, net new code bases, but that's going to demo really well. And so that's what you're seeing is like these really cool demos. In any event, the larger picture here is that we are going to get better at coding autonomously, I guess you could say. And I don't know if it ever gets to 100% where you don't need coders anymore, but it's going to make coders much more productive over time. You're going to get this huge multiplier effect on the ability to write code. And that's really exciting for a bunch of obvious reasons.
Freeberg, we've been tracking this evolution from, Gmail, guess the next word, guess the next phrase, guess the next sentence, to co-pilots. Now we have these role-based, agent-based solutions that startups are pursuing. What's next? If we follow this thread, what would the next evolution here be?
Well, the big push has been for this notion of AGI, to replace a human. And I think what we're seeing is software that replaces a specific human doing a specific thing, like being a lawyer, being an accountant, being an art director. If you think about the internet, when the internet, which was like networking software and the capabilities that arose from the connection of all these computers during the internet era, the innovation was everyone tried to create a business model, which was how do you take an existing vertical business and put it on the internet? I think what we're seeing in this era is everyone's taking a vertical human and creating a vertical version of a human in the AI era. And so I think like the success will probably accrue to one company that replaces one set of core human services, like being a lawyer, being an accountant, being an artist in whatever way, and that ends up being the specific vertical tool that people will use to automate and scale up their ability to do that task in an automated way. Because I think that there's like a great deal of capability that emerges in the fine tuning and the unique data that certain people may have to make that one tool better than the rest. And therefore, everyone will end up using this one lawyer service or this one accounting service or what have you. So I definitely think that's kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious where this is going. You got co-pilots assisting a developer or a lawyer, then the next, or a writer. Then they got the next phase. Okay, you've got a peer. So you're doing peer programming, or somebody's kind of working alongside you. You're checking their work. Hey, maybe they're even checking your work, seeing if you have bugs. Where this is going to be next year is there's going to be a conductor. There's going to be somebody who has a role, or a piece of software has a role, where you say, hey, you're a CEO of a company, you're a founder, a product manager. Here's your lawyer, here's your accountant, here's your developers, here's your designer. And now you will coordinate those 5 people. Now imagine how that changes startups when you as an individual have a conductor working with you and says, you know what? I don't know if I agree with this legal advice that's coming in relation to the tax advice, and maybe we should not even add this feature to the program. Let's talk to the product manager, the agent product manager, about taking that feature out so we don't have these downstream legal issues and we don't even have to file taxes in this area. It's going to get really interesting next year when they have a conductor.
The other way it may go, Jason, is you have a lawyer that has 50 associates working for them through the AI. So you don't replace the lawyer, you don't replace the software engineer. The software engineer levels up. And now the software engineer has 50 engineers available, 50 agents running, doing tasks for them. Because you do still need humans with domain expertise and creativity to think through architecture, to think through process, and to make sure that the AI agents are doing their job. So I think what it creates is extraordinary leverage for people and organizations, which is why generally economic productivity goes up. People don't lose jobs, they level up.
In this phase, the OpEx of companies will probably be cut in half.
Mm-hmm.
At the limit, I think Jason is actually absolutely right. I think you find that there'll be millions of companies with one person and then a whole layer of software and conductors and agents and bots. That's the future.
Yeah.
So you won't have these engineering people. That person should be running their own company. And so you'll just have millions and millions and millions and maybe billions of companies. And I think that that's really exciting. Not all of them will work. Many of them will fail. And a few of them will be ginormous. And it'll be up to the person who can navigate and be a conductor, as you said,
Yeah, and you
that's
think
going to be
about
really interesting.
the solo entrepreneur movement of the last couple of years. There were all these kind of like independent hackers building one item, like Phil Kaplan did with DistroKid. He just had like 2 or 3 people working on that, got very big. I was telling you guys about that Slopes app I showed you. I reached out to the founder of that. I was like, hey, tell me about the business. Like, it's enough of a business to support one person or 2 people. Like, there will be a lot of these apps or services, one conductor, and it makes what, $500,000 a year, $3 million a year, whatever. It's enough to support 1, 2, 3 people working on it. But previously, you'd be going to the venture community, like, oh, what did it take a modern app company, Saks, to kind of build an Android and an iOS app just 5, 10 years ago? If we were funding one 10 years ago, what would the footprint look like for a consumer app company?
If you're going to go all the way back to like the late 90s during the dot-com era, I remember that with PayPal, just to launch really what was an MVP, we had, I'd say, a dozen developers, and it was pretty expensive, and we had to set up our own colo. There was all this infrastructure that all got abstracted away with AWS. Then you move to the mobile era, and the app stores provide, there's just a lot more developer tools. There's a lot more APIs. Yeah, as well as distribution. But it's far easier to code these apps. So definitely things have gotten easier and easier. That's the trend, if that's the point you're trying to make. It's certainly never been easier to get started in creating something if you're a solo developer.
Yeah.
That being said, I think that depending on what you're trying to do, it's still usually the case that if you're trying to do something interesting and profound, you're going to need a small team of developers and a couple $1,000,000 to get you started.
Yeah. It used to be rule of thumb, I think, 12 people for an app company. You get 2 or 3 working on each platform, a couple of designers, a couple of testing and design, UX. You get to 10, 12 people to run a modern one.